excited to talk to you because, my sort of marketing consulting practice, I've worked with lots of different types of companies, different industries, but it wasn't until recently that I kind of zeroed in on famtech. And a lot of people kind of assume famtech is just like parents and kids and babies, and we just talked about it, sort of the stage of life that I'm in with two little kids. But it's way more than that. I didn't actually learn about the phrase sandwich generation till somewhat recently. And then it was sort of a light bulb moment. It's like, oh, of course, because I think a lot of folks like myself, I'm one of the oldest, I think, millennials. I'm right at the cutoff, but I am officially a millennial, but like just barely by like maybe a year. And so it's like that part of life where you start thinking about the sandwich, generation and being part of that generation. Is a good segue because you're the founder and CEO of Tumbleweed, which is a startup that is focused on sort of end of life planning. So maybe that's a good place to start. Why don't you just kind of give a quick kind of overview, elevator pitch of what the company is and what you do.
Sound good. Yeah. So Tumbleweed, we are a digital platform. We do sell direct to consumer, but our sweet spot is actually working with enterprise clients. So most specifically insurance and financial institutions. And really kind of Tumbleweed's goal is to identify with our aging parents, grandparents, what do they have? What do they not have? And let's get it organized, right? So it's a digital platform. We can upload wills, trust, power of attorney, insurance documents, final wishes, right? Like these are the things they want should something happen, or these are decisions that you should know about, or this is where information is. And then we can help them close gaps over time. What I tell people is Tumbleweed's not a one and done. It's really there to help navigate the stages of aging. And then if and when a death occurs, kind of that after death experience as well. So that's kind of a high level, but I come to this space from lived experience. I had 6 people pass away in the course of 6 years, and working in healthcare, I spent over 20 years in healthcare. I was like, wow, how is there not more technology in this space? And that's really what started the early ideation of eventually what became Tumbleweed. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know from some of the stuff you've posted on social media and some of the, I think maybe I heard an interview you gave on a different podcast. So I've heard a little bit about your story, lived experience, kind of going through it. And that was obviously the spark to go and create something. But, and I have a lot of questions sort of about that whole process. Sure. But going back to what you just talked about, your sort of long career in healthcare, and you've had a number of different types of roles. So let's maybe kind of start however far back you think makes sense to kind of go in your career. Because I personally, I love hearing, talking to founders and hearing about all the different career paths that sort of lead a lot of founders to the same spot, but their backgrounds are so varied and different, and interesting to me of how that, gets applied once that, entrepreneurial bug really, takes hold. So, tell me a little bit about kind of your career, kind of how you got started, however far back you think would make sense.
Sure. I guess I'll go ahead and kind of think about it in like the big buckets of like different roles and kind of transitions in my career. So in high school, I was applying to school actually to become a teacher. And so that's what I was applying to university for. I was a first time high school graduate, first generation, right? So applying for college was very complex and overwhelming and extremely difficult. But I thought I wanted to be a teacher, moved to California. I was in Arizona in high school, moved to California right after high school, and financially just had to work full time, actually more than full time. And so I did take classes part-time at junior college. But I realized pretty quickly, actually, I started working in a pharmacy. So I thought I wanted to become a pharmacist. And that was kind of the trajectory. Started working in learning and development a lot, which makes sense in the teaching interest background. So I actually was a regional trainer for the first 5 years of my career. Then I did a lot of acquisitions. I worked for CVS for 13 years. They did major pharmacy growth acquisitions in the early 2000s. And then eventually moved into talent management and recruitment. So I actually was a university relationship manager. Basically means I was a recruiter and an intern program manager over the relationship with graduate pharmacists, right? So they were going through school for pharmacy school. did that and left in 2013 to go back to school myself. Finally, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to school. I got a job teaching actually in vocational education. So I was a program director for pharmacy technicians, medical assistant, medical billing and coding.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked great because I worked like 7 to 3:30 most days. And so I went to night school while I was finishing my bachelor's degree, went to grad school, and then from there went and worked in a couple of hospital systems and a startup actually along the way as well. So in 2021, I left my last internal role where I was working in California. I worked for a hospital system, but I specifically supported the medical groups. And so in the state of California, it's a little bit complex, but physicians don't work for hospital systems as a provider. Like they could do admin type of roles, but anything where they're providing services has to be under a medical group. And so in my role, I actually supported 5 medical groups in their HR, organizational development, employee benefits, all of that. And so it was a lot about alignment to kind of the healthcare system. But at the end of the day, they were run by independent physicians who own these practices. So I learned a lot. And that was one of the moments where I loved being a part of. We were forming companies and we were building out strategy, and then we were recruiting, and then we were acquiring. And so I think that really kind of tapped into my interest again in entrepreneurship. I grew up with an entrepreneurial grandfather and an entrepreneurial father. But because my life was kind of like this, up and down, very chaotic, I wanted a little more stability when I was going out into the career world at first. But then 2021 left, started a consulting practice, and then ended up taking a 4-month road trip across the US, which was where Tumbleweed's idea was actually born. So yeah, it's a little bit about my background there. Happy to answer any more questions, but that's kind of the 23-ish years of kind of quick overview.
Yeah, kind of condensed down. Yeah, in the sort of entrepreneurship that you ended up getting into, is that something that you kind of always had? Did you, even if it maybe was not specifically what you ended up doing, you mentioned, being involved with a startup and sort of growing businesses. Is that something that you think you always had, or is that something that sort of grew slowly over time?
I think both, actually. I feel like I loved working in, I worked for CVS as a Fortune 10 and a Fortune 5 for a period of my career, right? So huge organization. And I was working my way up the ladder, right? Got really excited about it. But I definitely found I was drawn towards roles in innovation. I was drawn towards things that were new and transformative. So in 13 years with CVS, I was involved in a few very big transformational efforts. One was, completely changing the pharmacy management system, right? And that was like a 5-year project. And then acquiring small practices and then integrating into organizations. So I think I was always drawn towards things that were a little bit more tech forward, a little bit more innovative, right? I didn't really realize it at the time, but I learned pretty early on that I was very lucky that I picked up systems relatively easily, right? So when we were rolling out new systems, I just could jump in and pretty quickly navigate with simplicity. And that was not the case, which is probably also who I was in training for a lot of years. But even when I was a kid, I mean, I did an antique booth when I was a teenager. I used to go to sales and estate sales, and I used to do a lot of resale stuff, right? Because I'd be like, oh my gosh, this could be sold for 10 times more. Yeah. So I think I was always kind of on the hunt, right, for a good deal and turning it into something. But I will say, I think that I just let fear, right, get in the way. Yeah. And then the risk, right? There's risk in everything, but at least when it's like, okay, I don't make as much money as I would like to, or as much as I probably really need to, or even honestly deserve in some situations. But at least I know, okay, I can pay these bills every paycheck, and I can put a little aside for a vacation and maybe a little towards retirement. Because fast forward, when I did leave, right, it was all in. It was, I'm going to give everything I have, and we're going to see where this goes.
Yeah.
Risk and all. So,
it's funny you talk about having some of the stuff, when you're younger, and it's like there were signs, because I think for me, I've probably told this story before, but that with other founders that I've talked with, but my parents, we grew up on a cul-de-sac. So and it was sort of a little bit more rural, not a ton of people on our street ever. And yet I was the kid who's like, I'm going to do a lemonade stand. And, there's like one car driving by every, hour and a half. And I'm sure my parents were probably just called all the neighbors and like, just, please go outside, just buy a lemonade from him. And then there were other little things here or there as a kid, but my background was similar. I think more on the marketing side. Like I worked for big marketing agencies and ad agencies, and just learned a ton, and it was great. But the whole time, I always kind of felt like that there was work for a big company, and sometimes you kind of have to be the one kind of cog in the big wheel, and you don't always have the freedom to go kind of do other stuff that you find interesting. And for me, that was the spark to go do consulting, and then it sort of like grew from there. But getting back to your story, tell me a little bit more about this road trip that you took. Just a 4-month road trip across the United States sounds pretty intense. How'd that come about?
Oh gosh. So, I mean, how did it come about? My ex-fiance and I at the time, like many relationships, we kind of hit a bit of a, like, where are we at, where are we headed? We had decided we had remodeled a duplex that we had purchased and decided to sell that. And basically kind of take some time. Where's life headed next? I also too, at that point, was doing consulting. So I was doing specifically executive coaching and then executive retreats. And I loved it. I really enjoyed the work, but I kept finding myself like, I want to be a part of the problem. Like if I come back 6 months later, a year later, we're having very similar conversations, and I just wanted to get in and help them solve the problems, which is not what consulting is in executive retreats, right? It's, I give you an action plan. We come back, we revisit it, and so I had pretty well decided at that point that probably the consulting side of things was not going to be where I wanted to be, at least not that point in my career. And so I was like, okay, what does that mean? What am I going to do? And so decided to buy an RV. So I actually bought a 30-foot travel trailer and a new truck, and took our 2 dogs on the trip with me. My ex-fiance would come and meet in multiple places because he was a nurse, so lots of flexibility. And I was like, well, I'm just going to hit as many states as I can. It's something I've always wanted to do. Pretty early on, realized I was holding on to some grief about my grandparents who had passed away. One in 2017 when I was in grad school, and one kind of in the first year of COVID. And so just with life and not a lot of time, I hadn't really processed their grief. And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to be going through Iowa, so I'll go ahead and, visit their hometowns and take a look at the places they always talked about. And what happened was I came to Iowa and did exactly that. And then at that point, I probably had 20 or 30 different startup ideas that I was playing around with, right? I was just like making notes and like, is there anything here? Simultaneously, I was also trying to figure out, what does it mean to be a startup founder, right? Because I was listening to lots of podcasts and reading books, and I was like, at that time, early on in the career, early on in the journey, I was like, okay, what is it when they're talking about this pre-seed, big seed, little seed, series B, series, right? Like I get like there's some sort of order to this, but I didn't understand the nuance of it. So it was lots of just learning while coming up with the idea. And so then when I came through Iowa, I started reflecting on my grandparents passing, but not only their passing, but also kind of the stages they went through before they passed, right? Memory care, hospice. They were on a reverse mortgage with the land that they had owned, and us getting into a nursing facility. They did not have money. And there were just so many things along the way where I was like, gosh, this was such a pain, and how is there not more technology? And that just really started to get the juices flowing around ideation of, is there technology out there to support end of life and afterlife experience? What is out there? What's working? What's not working? And so that was really that would have been in almost 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, actually, June, July, August of 2022, when all of this early ideation started. So that's when the road trip was. And then from there, it just kind of took off.
Yeah. I sort of ask this question to a lot of founders that I talk to, because I think it's interesting. Famtech, and I feel like what you're building is kind of the overlap of maybe Famtech and InsurTech, and oftentimes the category label that you put on it is not that important. But I do think that a lot of companies I talk to, maybe not directly related to like COVID, but that COVID era of people rethinking everything, a lot of medical stuff in general, care, healthcare, first responders, people.
Yeah.
The future of work has kind of changed
Yep.
drastically. So all these different like forces coming together that I feel like was the catalyst for a lot of these companies to kind of start up, and then eventually maybe Famtech kind of became the label. But were you how quickly after that kind of road trip did you kind of say, okay, here, I think this is the idea? Because I've kind of been in your shoes, where I've have lots of ideas for businesses, and any number of them probably could work, and some of them maybe way too specific, way too grandiose. Like there's a whole spectrum in a bunch of different ways. So how quickly did you kind of zero in on, oh, this is the idea? Here's where I'm putting pen to paper to kind of map it out. How quickly did that happen?
Yeah, I wanted to quickly go back briefly. I think to your point, I think COVID did allow a lot of us to really ideate on what do we want our future lives to look like.
Yeah.
How do we want to have impact? I worked for a hospital system during COVID, and so did my ex fiance. Right, so he was on the front lines. He's a nurse. I was in an administration, and so it was intense, and it was. And when most people were furloughed and really struggling, he and I were both working 50, 60, sometimes 70 hours a week, right? And so that also, too, I think had an impact, at least for me. He was, kind of new into nursing at that point. But for me, I'd been in healthcare for 20 years, right? So I think there's definitely an impact there. In regards to the ideation, so the road trip, I continued to ideate on the road trip, and I was like, oh, wow, like there's so many ways we can come about this, so many ways we can help, right? We can do digital obituaries, and this is all pre-OpenAI, right? And now OpenAI was building, but it was not in the forefront of most of our minds. Certainly as a non-technical founder, I did not really know about OpenAI at that stage, at least not at any sort of understanding. And so looking at how can we bring technology to make it easier, also too, like I'm more, I'm not someone who sees myself having a funeral, maybe a celebration of life, but I certainly don't want it to be at a funeral home, right? That's just not where I want it. So I was like, there's got to be new places and modalities that some people would be looking for. So I was like, where can we really take this? And so for the first, 6 months, it was just ideas. It was really ideas and learning. What does it mean to be a startup? What does it mean to be venture backable versus, being a lifestyle business? So it was kind of two things were happening at the same time. One was what does it mean to be a founder? And then the other was, what is this idea and where does it fit best? Then at the end of 2020 to early 2023, I just barely started getting comfortable talking to a few family members and talking to potential customers about the idea. And then in April of 2023 was when I was like, okay, now is the time. I ended up reaching out to a colleague of mine that her and I had met at that point about 6 years earlier. And she was the first non-friend or family that I wanted to talk to the idea about. And so her name is Keisha. And so I reached out to her and she's like, yeah, let's have a conversation. So I shared it with her. I asked her, I was like, hey, do you want to get engaged in some place or maybe help with a little bit consulting? She's like, I don't know what a startup actually really does or what it means. So let's just keep talking. Fast forward a few weeks later, she said yes. She came in as a co-founder. And then we started looking at accelerator programs. And so came across when we were looking at accelerator programs, obviously Techstars is one of the big names. And they also have Techstars Pre-Accelerator, which are Techstars Startup Weekends. And so those are a 3-day event where you get together and you work on ideas. And they basically bring in judges to give feedback and mentors along the way. And so it was in June when Keisha and I were working on the idea. And I was like, okay, now is the time to take this idea into the world. We need to actually see, is anybody going to give us feedback on it? So happened to be looking at the pre-accelerator weekends. They had it in 5 different cities, one of which was Iowa City, Iowa. And so everyone was like, well, why in the world did you choose Iowa? And I was like, well, you have to understand the early story of Tumbleweed was actually born here because of my grandparents. They're from Northeast Iowa. So I was like, look, I have to travel to these 5 cities either way. So I may as well go to the city and the state in which the idea was initially born. So I had to jump on a plane the next day, came out to Iowa, ended up meeting someone who was also here, Colleen, who pitched right before I did a related idea. And I went up to her, I was like, hey, we kind of have a similar idea. Do you want to team up? And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm glad you asked. We ended up teaming up and taking first place that weekend. And what happened was that started to open a bunch of doors in a lot of states that are outside of the coastal areas. there's lots of effort to try and build startup ecosystems, right? And I didn't really know this at that stage. I do now. But Iowa had a lot of mentors and programs and grant opportunities and pitch competitions that they were trying to build. And so they started to open some doors for us here in Iowa. Keisha and I ended up inviting Colleen to join us as a third co-founder. And then fast forward in September of 2023, ended up relocating myself and the business to Iowa. And we've been here for 2 years now. And there's a lot of, opportunities that doors that have opened for us, especially being a part of the insurance ecosystem. Des Moines is the second largest hub in the US, right? And then also kind of some of the mentors, connections, and ecosystem builders that are here. So
yeah. And over the course of the couple years of kind of bringing together the co-founders and working and building, how did the idea kind of change along the way? I assume from day one, with any startup, you're learning a ton and you're getting punched in the face and you're pivoting and it's messy, and if you just keep going, eventually you kind of figure it out. But I'm kind of curious if the idea or the approach changed a lot, or was it more just kind of making refinements?
It's funny. I'll be curious what your thoughts are on that question. So I'll kind of share the journey in which we've gone through, because I think about it in some ways where some of it feels very logical and others it feels transformative, right? But which are true. So early stage, the early ideation was extremely focused in the after death experience, right? Basically looking at someone's death and then navigating that journey after a death occurred was where we first started. And one of the things that I learned along the way, and I try and share with first-time founders, especially, that because I've started mentoring others, that I think it kind of happens, right? I believe in giving back. And so when they ask me certain things, one of the big things I say is like, you got to talk to potential customers. You have to talk to them over and over and over again. And that was something that a lot of mentors and folks had shared with me. So I got really comfortable in that. And so had we not done that, we probably would have stayed in the post loss experience, the after death experience. But when we first had our clickable prototype, which for anybody listening who doesn't know what a clickable prototype is, it's basically, it looks like a product, but there's really no development in the back end. You leverage a tool, something like Figma, you put it together, and then you take it and actually walk through a potential user and walk them through what it would look like, have them answer questions. Well, what are they thinking? That sort of thing. And so that was the early ideation. And what came through over and over again in those conversations was, gosh, I so wish this would have existed when my mom passed away, or when my grandfather passed away, or when my spouse passed away. But you know what? I need something because I want to get ahead of this, and I don't want to be the burden or be left with additional burden in the future. And so the customers, the ones who really helped us identify the opportunity, was in the pre-planning, the getting organized. What do they have? What do they not have? How do they close gaps over time? And so that was kind of the evolution from, we can still support someone through, it's on average 14 months to close an estate in the US. We are not attorneys. We are not estate managers, but we can basically be a digital tool to help them navigate things to be thinking about along the process. And then they can connect to the professionals if and when needed, like if they have to go through probate or if they need to get a lawyer involved, et cetera. But then that really kind of led into, like, the pre-planning was the big opportunity. And so that's where we really started to focus our effort. And that was that next journey. So we built out our MVP, all about the pre-planning aspect. Customers like, oh my gosh, yes, this is definitely more of what I need. And now fast forward 2 years later, I would say that it's all of that, but now we can leverage all of our early conversations that we had one-on-one with our users or potential users, and we're bringing in agentic AI tools, right? So they can help augment the experience. They can be there 24/7. We can also serve more customers more affordably, because that's just the benefit of agentic AI. So we can use those early conversations to build out our product where we are today. And I think the refinement where we are is, which really I think is how you and I got connected, in the sandwich generation, the folks who are caring for the aging person. Our beachhead market is a sandwich generation. It's on average, right, from the data, 85% women who are about 40 to 60 who are helping to care for or navigate an aging person in their circle. Parent, grandparent, friend, even a neighbor. Right. And so I think that over time, it was a bit of iteration with a lot better focus into how do we get this into the hands of the people who need it most right now.
Yeah. And in terms of the product, however far kind of in the weeds you want to go is fine. The pre-planning, what does that look like in terms of the product? Is it a a place where people are going to get questions answered? Is it a hub for keeping documents? Like what all kind of gets included in that?
Yep. Great question. So right now it's very focused on, think about it as a digitally protected file cabinet,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's got everything in one location. It's got legal documents, right? Will, power of attorney, advanced healthcare directive, trust. It's got insurance policies and plans, right? Life insurance. Maybe they pre-purchased a funeral insurance. Maybe they've got long-term care insurance, right? And the reason why we really recommend for our users to get it uploaded into the platform is for the folks who are the ones who are going to be caring for them, if they're doing it for themselves or who's going to be caring for someone else's. When something happens, it's really hard to find all this.
Yeah.
And we hear this over and over again in stories. It's like the will's in this cabinet, the insurance policies are there, there's some stuff in email, there's some stuff in text message, there's some stuff in notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And something happens, like, where the heck is all
Yeah.
this? We're trying to get it all organized. And then what we're starting to do is now we're partnering with experts in the space. So, for example, let's say someone doesn't have a will. Well, we can actually connect them with a partner to close that gap. Or maybe they have a will, but they need an updated version.
Mm-hmm.
We can help them connect them to a resource. The reason why insurance companies are excited about what we're doing is a couple of things. One is that we're creating a place that can also create better engagement for the insurance company, because insurance companies are paying for it for their users. Like, hey, you have this policy from us. We want you to get organized and get prepared, and we want you to know that we care about you and your family. So it's a way for them to feel like the carrier, is more connected to
Mm-hmm.
them. But the other thing too is that we can also offer opportunities to close gaps over time, right? So let's say, for example, I'm putting together my mom's package, right, in Tumbleweed, and I've identified, okay, she's got her will, we've got her POA and her advance directive, she's documented her final wishes. But you know what? We're starting to think about, okay, at some point she's probably going to go into a nursing facility. And we know that money is going to be tight, and she's probably not going to be able to pay for that with what she has. So we're going to need to be looking at other resources through Medicare, Medicaid, et cetera. Oh, wow. The information actually told me that, did you know you can actually purchase a pre-need policy and actually carve out some of the money that your mom has and prepay for that ahead of time?
Mm-hmm.
Benefit of that is, one, you can get decisions made, but two is, if they're going to run out of money anyway, you may as well prepay for it if they're going to run out of money, especially because if not, the family's left holding the bag after something happens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've seen so many situations where people have lost a loved one or someone in their circle, and they're having to go out and try and do the fundraising
Mm-hmm.
on top of managing grief and trying to deal with the entire situation, right? And a lot of those, not all, but could have been mitigated with information earlier.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're trying to help them. And so it started very much in the organization, but now where it's at is basically when you come in, it's almost like a mini intake, like, hey, Dan, how's it going? What are you hoping to achieve today?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we can kind of get a quick little pulse on where things are at. And then, okay, here's where we're at. Let's get that organized. And then the next time you pop in, same thing. Hey, Dan, last time you were here, you had talked about considerations for best time to put your grandfather in a nursing facility.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that, or where are you at with it? Right. So we can kind of keep that conversation going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have a few questions. I'm trying to figure out sort of the best way to the right order to ask them, and this might be going backwards a little bit in the story, from when you kind of developed the prototype for this and you were getting in front of customers, and then ultimately found kind of the path and started building, the actual product. At what point did you kind of have, kind of the MVP, or to have put something in the hands of customers to get them using the actual product, to get kind of feedback on that?
Yeah. So we started with the clickable prototype in October, November, December of 2023.
Mm-hmm.
We had our MVP built and ready to deploy in February of 2024. Yes. So February 2024 was when we actually had the MVP where they could log in, they could do all of these things on their own. October of 2024 was the beyond beta version, right? So it's the more robust. We had user feedback. And it's actually now it's in full deployment. It's what we actually have we have a partnership with an insurance carrier. That's the platform that they use. And now we're adding in new agentic AI tools and then just building out our roadmap based on customer feedback.
Yeah.
So it was, end of 2023 was our clickable prototype. Q1 2024 was our MVP, and then Q4 was our post beta
Hmm.
product. So that's kind of been the trajectory of the product
Yeah.
itself.
And then the co-founders and the way you guys kind
Mhm.
of came together and like created the team,
Yep.
navigating all of that, how did you guys kind of divide up? I'm assuming each person brought, maybe a different skill set, or maybe just carved out, different areas to be, to sort of own, for bringing the product to market. How did you guys kind of handle that?
Yeah. So I think, every co-founding team is a little bit different. So I'm the only full-time person
Hmm.
today. So my two co-founders are both
Mm.
fractional at this time. And like anything, right? There's pros and cons with,
Yeah.
founder capacity. But the reality is we are all maybe a little more mature than some of the average founders, especially ones who go through like YC and those where it's,
Hmm.
early 20s where it's just different, right?
Hmm.
We're in more middle life, I guess I'll call it, not middle age, but maybe middle life, all three of us. And so, yeah, it was definitely dividing not only the work and specialty, but also I came from working in talent management and in HR. I was very mindful of capacity. I was like, look, like, what are we going to be able to do to achieve these things? So someone might be say like, oh, I want to work on this, or I can lead this up. And it's like, okay, but how many hours can you commit to
Hmm.
that? 10. Okay, well that's going to get us about 25% of the way there. That means that we need to divide it up by other
Hmm.
pieces. So it was not only just looking at areas of specialty and areas of experience, but also to
Yeah.
capacity. And so I think that's for me where I did my best, and it probably wasn't always perfect. And I'm sure we've made mistakes, but it allowed us to achieve a lot, and we're here today. And through that. So my background obviously was visionary. I'm the one who's always out pitching. I'm the one who attends all the conferences, do all the sales conversations. Keisha's our operations person, right? She's all things operations. And then Colleen has been the one who she comes from a UX UI background. And she's also the co-founder of a company called Softvoya, which is a offshore dev shop that does full stack
Mm.
development. And so through that relationship, that was actually, we were able to build our product through Colleen in that relationship.
Hmm.
And so not only was she the UX UI expert, but we also had a connection to more affordable dev shop
Hmm.
support, which worked for us at the stage in which we were
Yeah.
at.
Yeah. 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 And I think you're right. There's definitely no playbook. The more founders I talk to, and I try to talk to as many as I can and have these types of conversations, and it's evident every single person I talk to, there's no one playbook. And if anybody says there is, then it's um, probably not completely accurate, because um, I've been a part of a couple different startups where, not as just a consultant, but sort of like joining the team, and each one has kind of been different. And some were successful, some not so much. But
Yeah.
you're always learning and growing, and figuring out what works, for you and the team.
Yeah.
One other question I had was at the different, kind of stages, or kind of the evolution of the product, and kind of bring it to market. How did you handle kind of, because it sounds like you did a very good job of like talking to customers or potential customers and learning and getting feedback. How were you finding them? How were you reaching them? Were you doing? I'm sure some of it was like just, really, grinding it out and just getting people direct face to face and talking, and meeting people, almost like a kind of sales or networking kind of a way. But like, at what point did you kind of, lean on some of the marketing and brand building, just to kind of reach people and get them aware of what you're building?
Well, I think we're somewhere in the
Hmm.
middle, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. So, one of the, for better or for worse, when you're working in a space that's looking at end of life, aging, and death, right? It's something that we're all going to be touched by or have been. So, it created a natural opportunity for a huge amount of connection, right? So, quite candidly, I could probably through first line or second line conversations talk to customers every day, all day from here until the end of time.
Yeah.
That's just the reality, because this
Yeah.
is not something that's going away. It might look different. And so for us, like, customer discovery has never been a
Hmm.
challenge. It just hasn't. And then I think to your point on the marketing side, I do not come from a marketing background. I actually had to get really comfortable I was recommended a book, which I imagine you probably know, but Founder Brand,
Mm-hmm.
one of the best books and it came kind of at a really perfect time because, a lot of early mentors are saying like, Paul, at the stage you're at, you are Tumbleweed and Tumbleweed is you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is 18-ish months ago. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. So you've checked out my socials, especially on LinkedIn. I am very, very active on social media. I mean, I'm not the most hyper engaged, but I mean, I try to be very active to keep presence.
Mm-hmm.
But that was not a comfort for me 24 months
Mm-hmm.
ago. That's just not how I was. I mean, even though I worked in recruitment and I worked for large companies, the necessity wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to really rethink my thought leadership. What do I talk about? How do I continue to be present in people's minds? And so that was something I really have had to learn along the way. And we have some very active social channels as well for Tumbleweed platform. But I think that that's something that continues to be useful. I mean, I have people come up to me all the time who say, "Oh my gosh, I see you everywhere." And I'm like, thank you. I don't know who the heck you are, but thank you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So at least that tells me I'm doing the right
Yeah.
thing. But I think that the biggest challenges, and I imagine many founders have the same challenges, we're in a space that there's a need. We're in a space where people have an interest. Then it's getting them to, okay, actually go and make the choice to actually purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's we've got the first couple of things, but it's that constant evolution. And that's where we have identified partnering with insurance companies has been a sweet spot for us because they're paying for it for their members,
Mm-hmm.
but also too, they have a more um, engaged clientele in certain spaces, right, that are already kind of wanting some of these
Mm-hmm.
services. And so we're trying to lean into that opportunity, but definitely still doing a lot of work in our social channels, constantly making iterations and edits. I'm excited to be here with you. I shared, I believe, that we're getting ready to launch a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is that community
Yeah.
focus, right? In the end of life planning space, aging space, it's all about the sandwich generation. It's called Sandwiched, right? And it's just stories from people who are living the sandwiched life. Like, how are they navigating, pets and families and kids and businesses and work and marriage or divorce and aging people in their circle,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're kind of sandwiched between all of
Yeah.
it. And so that's what those conversations really are. And the hope is that will create more thought leadership and more excitement, engagement in the space around what we're doing at Tumbleweed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are your kind of thoughts today on the podcast? Do you have kind of a format in mind? Are you still working on it? What are you sort of thinking about?
Yep. So we actually have recorded at this point, I believe it's 9.
Mm.
We actually are launching on September 5th. So I don't know kind of the timing of this. So it may already be out or may be
Yeah.
coming, but it'll be on all the pod channels. And it's going to be, it's very conversational,
Yep.
right? I that's why I did not call it the Tumbleweed podcast. I was very mindful of, this is not a sales
Mm-hmm.
podcast. If people never use our platform, I hope they will, because I think it could be helpful. But if they never did, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's truly okay. What really happened was, when I talk to customers over and over again, the biggest thing I hear is, I feel isolated. I feel alone. I don't know who to talk to because no one else, I don't think, is caring for an aging
Mm-hmm.
person. They don't understand the weight of all of this. And as of right now, I think the world is shifting a little bit in that. And to your point, you talked about at the beginning that you just started hearing the term sandwich generation. I think that it's becoming more of a norm and more the thing that people are talking
Mm-hmm.
about. But even, gosh, 5 years ago, people were not talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
It was very, very
Yeah.
uncommon. And so I think now we can actually start to amplify stories and get it in front of people who are just trying to navigate through all
Mm-hmm.
this. I mean, I'll be very candid with you. It's interesting that Tumbleweed really kind of is an end of life planning platform, but it's really, the sweet spot is helping individuals navigate aging parents or
Mm-hmm.
grandparents in their life.
Yep.
So aging looks very different, right? So I actually have been a family caregiver almost my entire life. My mom lives with mental illness, and she started being institutionalized when I was 12 for the first time. And as the eldest child, and her being single most of that time, I would have to jump in as a caregiver for my sisters, but I would also jump in for a caregiver for my mom.
Mm-hmm.
So this has now been, fast forward 30 years, and it's been exhausting. And I have burnt out more than once.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, mental illness has ups and downs. And right now, dealing with a pretty difficult situation with my mom. One of my sisters has stepped up at one point, another sister has stepped at another point. So I'm trying to kind of bring in the circle around her.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot, and it's very difficult to navigate. And, luck, for better or for worse, not everyone deals with mental illness, but it is similar to what people deal with when there's cognitive decline.
Yeah.
Right. Alzheimer's and dementia is exhausting. And when I talk to people who are navigating that space, the level of care is so strong. And unfortunately, often their own mental health and their health takes a downturn when they're caring for that other person.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really where the goal of Sandwich is to come in, for people to hear these stories, to know they're not alone. But even too, it's informing our platform, right? It's helping us understand what are the pain points that our users are experiencing that we need to be considering in future product features or in the way in which we talk to customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really the podcast is all about community, but it also is all about learning.
Mm-hmm.
These are great conversations to learn and to iterate and to enhance what we're doing in the day-to-day at Tumbleweed.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that answered your question, but that's
Yeah.
kind of the way I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, no, it does completely. I think, this podcast for me is relatively new. I've been doing it for most of this calendar year, but it wasn't until somewhat recently that I sort of focused it more on FamTech. But a similar path that I took to sort of the podcast, which is, any company, and I'll flip this and talk more about founders in FamTech. The idea of having a founder-led brand is, I mean, I don't want to go too extreme, but it's almost mandatory. Like, because if you have a company, a brand, and you're solving a problem that's like deeply personal and very emotional, and especially end of life, more so than, other stages of life. If you have a product or a company or a brand and there isn't that human like connection to somebody who's building it, even with the best messaging, the best marketing, my theory is that it still comes across a little bit like sterile, a little bit cold. There's not, it's without that like human element to it. So the question that I always get from clients is like, okay, well, how the heck can I do that? Because a lot of people are like what you talked about, and I'm certainly this way too. Like, it was not natural for me to be posting on social media. I hate any implication that I think I'm an expert and I'm like doling out knowledge to the masses. It just felt horrible to me. And then doing this podcast was kind of the same way. It's like, oh gosh, another marketing guy with a podcast. We don't need another one of those. But I come back to the same thing that I think you realized, which is it's not, doing the podcast is not to sell anything. It's not to create leads for your business. It's not to do anything else except for a connection between the 2 or 3 or however many people talking on the podcast, the connection that you're not Joe Rogan, you're not reaching hundreds of millions of people, but like if you're connecting with 1 or 2 people and they're taking away something from it, that's the kind of thing that, at least I'm trying to do with this podcast. And it sounds like you're kind of have the same approach, which is if I could just do it forever and just slowly connect with the right people in the smallest ways and just have that connection. And then that feeds into the founder-led brand. And, there's a lot of visibility in behind the person, behind the mission, more than kind of surface level. That it makes a ton of sense that would kind of be the approach that you're taking. And again, especially with FamTech, I think it's needed, right?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think definitely, I think in all spaces to a certain extent, but I do agree with you. I think there are certain, tech spaces where the humanity, the empathy, the personal story and connection, I think does lead itself or lend itself to the product, right? Obviously we have competitors in the market, and a lot of them have raised a lot of money, right? And they're very, very successful, some very big names, and so I get asked all the time from, not only from potential investors, but also from our partners, like what makes you different, right? And I always try to, as I'm building relationships, and really kind of focus on the look, like, not only have I lived this, but I am still living this today.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything I'm doing with my mom and my grandmother and other people in my circle is informing. It's like long-term customer discovery,
Mm-hmm.
really. It's
Yeah.
like, so when I'm dealing with something where I'm just like, man, I feel like I'm gonna break, I'm like, okay, this is why we're building Tumbleweed. Like, and I'm just building it for myself, obviously, but I think it is a reminder of like, I'm solving my own pain point. And I think that as a founder, one, it makes it a lot easier to get up every single day and to keep
Yeah.
going when you're building something that you see direct connection to. But I do think that some of the feedback I've received from our competitors is, for lack of a better word, and this is not something that's as tangible, but it's like, Paul, your heart is in it and that feels
Mm-hmm.
different,
Yeah.
right? Because yes, I'm selling, and yes, we need to grow. I mean, we're a business. Like, without money and customers, we cease to exist, right? So I have to do those things. But the way I try and do it is really about, hey, how can this enhance your customer's experience, or how can this answer, help your policyholders?
Mm-hmm.
Or honestly, like, I worked in employee benefits most of my career. Like, this is needed, especially FamTech right now. That whole space, employees are becoming more and more stretched, and that's not going to get any
Yeah.
easier. So we can give them tools and resources and digital navigators, and co-pilots. I think all those things are going to enhance their experience, which means an improvement for the company, because that means less time on other
Mm-hmm.
things, right? And more time when they're at work, focused on work.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
And going backwards, like a tiny bit in the story, when you were building the product, and I'm assuming at some point you're, at least with most founders I talk to, it's like you kind of figure out what's the pure sort of consumer message, the product that is going to help them, and then you kind of start to explore. All right, are there other like avenues to kind of get this in the hands of a bunch of the right people through like a B2B play? And for you, it sounds like it was a realization you had, like, hey, there's a path here to go, through insurance companies and what that could look like. How early did you know that was going to be the path? What did that kind of journey look like? Was it an easy decision? Was it something you thought about a lot?
Easy. I mean, I don't think it was a hard decision. I think, to me, so I did not work in insurance as like an insurance agent, or even working in an insurance carrier.
Mm-hmm.
However, like I did say, I was an employee benefit decision maker, and I was an insurance decision maker more than half of my career at different points in different capacities.
Mm-hmm.
So I understood insurance, at least from like a buyer's lens, and kind of always had that in the back of my mind. And employee benefits, it's funny. I think I've been in a benefits geek probably my whole life,
Mm-hmm.
because I remember when I was 17 years old, getting my first full-time job and choosing benefits for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I got an FSA, right? A flexible spending account. And I was telling all my coworkers, like, oh my gosh, like, do you guys have an FSA? Like, did you know about, like, people like, what are you talking about? What is it? And I'm talking about people very mature for me.
Mm-hmm.
These are people who have kids,
Mm-hmm.
some have grandkids. Like, well, why does it matter? Like, this is pre-tax dollars. Like, take what you're spending on average, and those are pre-tax dollars, right? Like, I was advocating for it for all of my
Yeah, you
coworkers.
got it right
So I
away.
look back at that and it makes me smile now, working in insurance. But I think that, to me, it was a natural fit, right? And we did go direct to consumer early stage. That's where we
Yeah.
started, right? And there's totally a need and there's totally an opportunity. But the reality is that the time to success and the money it takes to be that successful is costly.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about the cost of acquisition, especially in direct to consumer space, it's a real thing. Because let's say, for example, our first insurance carrier partnership took from initial interaction till signing the deal 15 months, right? Which is actually ahead of the curve for insurance. Insurance is usually 18 to 24
Yeah.
months for most startups. So I feel very good about the fact that, we did that even a little bit sooner. But the volume, right? Like, the volume of the contract is so much more different than every conversation we have to have with a customer to get them to purchase the solution, right? And so we still obviously do direct to consumer, but it's much more driven by word of mouth and our social media and marketing efforts, right? We don't spend dollars on advertising. That's not our strategy. It's really just like be useful and be helpful and focusing on the B2B partnerships. But I think also too, I would be remiss to not say that there were also some early advisors that helped me look at the opportunities in the space differently, right? So some mentors of like, have you explored the funeral space? That's where I started, right? I had wonderful conversations with funeral homes trying to be a potential partner, but a lot of funeral homes are mom and pop shops, and essentially they very gently closed their door in my face. And their fear was I was trying to steal their business. I wasn't. I still don't want to steal their business. I want people to use funeral homes that want them, but I want people who don't want to use them to have another solution, and we could be that solution. But we could also enhance the experience, right? We're a digital tool that can be with them 24/7, where a funeral home director just can't by volume, you know? And one of the early mentors here in Iowa that I met with said, Paul, like, have you heard about the Global Insurance Accelerator? And I was like, no, what's that? Because we were looking at accelerators at that point. And she's like, it's a Des Moines based global insurance accelerator, and they only take, 5 to 7 each year. She's like, but I think you'd be a great fit for the program. And I was like, that's interesting, because I've been trying to think of an angle to sell into insurance and employee benefits. So when I think about the process, it was very easy for me to find the opportunity in selling as an employee benefit. It was harder for me initially to see why would insurance companies want to partner with us. But going through the Global Insurance Accelerator we went through at the beginning of 2024, it's a 4-month program. Great experience. Got to talk to 70 insurance carriers, had 13 fantastic mentors that were just mentoring us in the program. Really understood like how are we a policyholder engagement tool? How can we actually help with the beneficiary claim experience in the end, right? Well, if we have everything organized, we can get the money in their hands sooner. So it was really leaning into why carriers care about this space and creating longevity in their relationship with their policyholders, right? So leaning into how can we enhance those spaces. So for me, I always saw it as an opportunity, but definitely a few people said, hey, I think you need to look at this space. And then we did, and then really kind of some doors started to open, and okay, we leaned in more.
Yeah. And my whole career, even when I was on the agency side, like working in marketing, it's been a lot of B2B. So like B2B has kind of always been my background. So to me, it's just a very interesting B2B, just oftentimes like just very different than pure consumer like marketing, and a little bit more complex, maybe not more complex, but just different. And I also am especially interested in companies that have like a B2B2C play, because it is very, very different, as I'm sure you know, and probably could talk about for an hour, figuring out the pitch of Tumbleweed to a consumer of like why they would maybe want to use it, and then a pitch to an insurance company of why they would want to offer that to their members. So was the accelerator sort of like the boot camp to figure out how to go create that pitch, that message, or was that something you just kind of figured out along the way after just having a bunch of the conversations?
Yeah, I would say that probably the refining of the business model was not a strength of the program. Now, I don't know that was necessarily on GIA. That could have been on me as a first-time founder, right? That could have been there were so many other things I was trying to learn. But what I will say is that I learned really well how to pitch to carriers, how to learn how to talk to carriers, understand, how to navigate that space, right? And then probably halfway through the program is when I started to pitch the business model, and here's why you'd want to partner with us. That's when I would say I was able to start refining some of those opportunities. But I would say in general, that was probably not the main focus. The program really talks about learning insurance. So it's great for people who have never worked with insurance, right? So it's fantastic. You can really become an insurance, not expert, but you can understand insurance at a high level going through the program. But the program is really all about mentorship. And the mentorship is really driven by the startups that go through the program, right? And so you basically, like early stage, you do what they call mentor matching. You meet 75 potential mentors. There's a bit of a double opt-in. I really like Dan. I think he could help me with marketing. I want to work with Dan, right? And then did Dan list me as a first or second choice?
Mm-hmm.
Then there's kind of a matching that happens, and
Sure.
then we get put together. And so I think that, whenever people ask me about like how I chose my mentors, I kind of bucketed it in a few different areas. One is, are these potential carrier relationships that we could be a good partner
Mm-hmm.
for? Right. Because some carriers, like, we don't fit in PNC. We don't fit in the PNC space. Right. We fit well in life and health, obviously pre-need funeral, but we just don't fit if they only are PNC. I worked with some PNC folks, property and casualty,
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, that were great mentors, but I chose them because Dan is a marketing expert, and I know Dan could teach me what I need to know about
Sure.
marketing. Right. And so it just looked different kind of in the different interactions. But I think it was that. And I think honestly, too, where I've learned a lot is well, let me put it this way. I hypothesized in 2024 that even though we're a Des Moines based company where huge carriers are based, that's not where decisions are made.
Mm-hmm.
Decisions are made at insurance industry
Mm-hmm.
conferences. So I hypothesized that in 2024. I went to 7 different carrier conferences, and I could see that impacting my sales conversations, right? 2025 doubled up the amount of conferences I'm going to, and that's moving our conversations
Yeah.
into the next stages better. So what I learned was decisions are made at industry conferences in the insurance space. They're not really made sitting
Mm-hmm.
in an office here in Des
Mm-hmm.
Moines, which is great as a startup because I travel a lot, so I can be all over. But I think really that's what it allowed me to do, is refine how to get to the right folks and also how to continue the relationship
Yeah.
build. Because if 18 to 24 months is the average, like as a startup, you got to survive through that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's actually how we were connected. I think it was
Correct.
a
Yep.
shared connection from
Yep.
the InsurTech. And there's a couple of different ones, and the names are all very similar. But it was the one in
Yep.
New York a couple of years ago, I think. And so I think a shared connection said, "Hey, you should talk to Paul." And I think that's when I reached out, because my background in marketing insurance actually goes way back. I went to Illinois State University, and that's where State Farm and Country
Yep.
Insurance, and I think there's even a third company based there. So they had this like really big insurance program. But I knew I wanted to do marketing, and said, you know what, I'll pick it up as like a second major. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. I didn't think much of it. My dad is an actuary. He has had
Oh,
this.
really?
He's
Oh,
had
okay.
this like
Yep.
long career in life insurance. He
Yep.
actually went on his own, kind of talking about what you were talking about earlier. Like he's been kind of an entrepreneur, and has been a consultant for more times, more years than he was like working on the corporate side, and has worked for some startups. And so through connections from him, and then having this sort of random double major in marketing insurance, I've actually had some clients in insurance, and have gone to a few conferences as well. And I agree. There's one specific conference that I've gone to that it is really based on networking, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
like what I think a lot of conferences are, where it's just the big flashy sales booths and people are just pitching, stuff all the time. But they're in insurance, at least I've found a couple that are very focused on networking, and getting, deals done. And by deals, it's, I think, kind of what you're talking about, is sort of thinking about innovation and how can this product help you and me. And it's like a two-way thing, and growing together, and just finding the right connections can be kind of hard, but at the right conference, you can do that. So I'm sure you've been, you know, probably quickly becoming a pro at getting the most out of attending a conference. Because I don't know if I've completely cracked that. It's I'm an introvert, and I don't feel like I don't. Again, we were talking about this earlier. I don't love that thing about like pitching and selling. But I guess when you reframe it as just a real like networking, it's probably a little bit easier, right?
Yeah, well, and to your point, most people are surprised when I say this, but I'm actually a very high
Yeah.
introvert, and that's a lot. That's because most people, the average person, doesn't understand. They think a quiet person is an introvert and a loud person is an extrovert.
Yeah.
That's actually not. It has more to do with energy
Right.
and all of that. But I'm not. That's not what we're here to talk about. But I'm actually a very high introvert, and what I will say is a couple of things about insurance conferences. And I've been going to conferences in different spaces most of my career, right? Some were very health focused, some were very HR focused, like different things over my career. But um, insurance folks like to party. Let me put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So InsurTech Connect in Vegas, I went for the first time last year, and it is a massive, massive conference that goes all day, and it goes until about 1 or 2 in the morning every single night. I I had 4 to 6 after hour networking events every single night of the
Oh man.
conference. And that's actually where the relationships are more
Yep.
developed than they are inside of the event
Mm-hmm.
itself. Right. And so I think that was something I had to learn, to your point. And so to your point, the introverted side of me would have been more like, okay, I sat at our demo booth for the last 9 hours. I want to go to dinner and chill a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm like, nope, can't do that. Got to be going to these events, right? And because that's where net connections are made and decisions are really made. And it probably helps that some libations are included. So people's
Mm-hmm.
like, they're more candid with you. Like, hey, Paul, like, I like what you're doing, but how are you approaching this? Or, what about this competitor? Like, why are you different? So you just get deeper conversations. And I think also too, like, this was the biggest surprise to me, but it makes total sense as we want to work with people we
Mm-hmm.
like at the end of the day,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not saying if you're likable that they're going to choose to work with you. That's not the case. But I do feel like when you're likable and there's a relationship developed that's deeper than just hey Dan, how's it going? It's more of a like, hey Dan, last time we talked, your kid was starting kindergarten. How are they doing? Like, how's that
Yeah.
going? Right? Kind of that deeper level connection.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels different. And I think they work harder to see, is there a pathway forward
Yeah.
for us? So I'm still learning
Yeah.
too. I am by no means an expert, but I definitely have found that conferences are really a key to our success.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about it for a couple of reasons. One was I think that it really allows people to get to know you as a person. But what's deeper is, at least for me and my perspective, is we're de-risking their concern about us as a startup.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we can afford and invest in being at 4, 5, 6, 8 huge conferences every year, which the main concern I always get from insurance carriers when partnering with startups is, are you going to be here 18 months from
Yeah.
now? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's their biggest fear, because these are legacy carriers. They've been around 100 years, 150 years, maybe 180 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's their main concern. And so them seeing us consistently at all of these things says, like,
Yeah.
no, we're not going
Yeah.
anywhere. We're here.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it makes sense. I've talked with a couple of founders that have been trying to overcome that mountain of like selling to really established, like legacy, big, institutions that have been around forever, and just how hard that is. And when you, at face value, it's just like, oh, you're the little guy selling to the big guy. It's not really that simple. It's so much more
No.
complex and nuanced, which a lot of founders learn pretty quickly, just how that works. But getting back to kind of marketing and branding a little bit, and I try not to make too much of, I'm a marketing guy. It's what I love talking about. I find a lot of founders, and I'm curious what you think about this, that they'll say, well, I'm not, I don't have a ton of marketing background. I don't particularly enjoy it. I know it's something I have to do. And I think the immediate response I get a lot is, well, we're not really investing a lot in marketing yet, because, maybe you're not, managing a big complex email program, or you're not running ads, or you're not doing whatever. But I always kind of tell founders, like, those first couple years when you're figuring out the story, you're figuring out the pitch, you're figuring out how to talk to customers, you're learning, you're figuring out how to like put all of that together into, like something as simple as an elevator pitch, or what you're saying at conferences, or, the various pitch decks. There's all these kinds of things that are it's a little bit of marketing, it's a little bit of sales, a little bit of networking, it's a little bit of just building the product. I wrap all that up into the brand. The founder sort of like
Yeah.
how front and center the founder might be, putting all those pieces together. To me, that is marketing. That's the brand. What were some of the kind of challenges that you came across? Because I think you said earlier that, you're not a marketing person by, the different roles you've had or experience you've had, but what were some of the bigger challenges that you came across that kind of fit under a marketing umbrella?
I mean, I think you spoke to a lot of them. I think, one of the pieces of advice that I received early on by a handful of folks, which I really listened to, was first and foremost, build a monthly newsletter and maintain it, at least for investors and ideally for customers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they look different, the things you include. And so, but I'm like early stage, I was like, we don't even know what the heck we're doing yet. We don't have a product.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to understand the benefits of it. Right. But just like talking about, your thought leadership, maybe article you read, right? So just maintaining it, that was actually really helpful to boost my confidence in as we were kind of building and iterating and getting feedback. And so I think that was something that was really meaningful. And also too, then we had a nice network of potential customers or partners or even investors that we could be reaching out to through those newsletters. And so I think that was really useful. I think the other thing is that for me, the biggest, it's not hard, but I think all founders probably say the same thing. Like, there's not enough hours in the day. There's just not, because you're constantly juggling balls and priorities are shifting, right? And so it's constantly, don't let any of the glass balls drop, let the rubber ones bounce, right? And so sometimes, maybe you and I had a great interaction and I think you'd be a great lead as a customer, and I forget to upload it into HubSpot, right? Or whatever CRM it is we're using. And so I go back and add it in later, but then that impacts the kind of follow-up channel. And so it's just kind of for me, I think the pieces that I constantly am trying to be better at is the infrastructure, right? And utilizing the tools, building out the funnels, right? Which is to me, very sales marketing term. But it is really important because that's how you track metrics. And that's how you can, when we're getting a question from a partner or from a customer or from an investor about, well, how long does it usually take for someone to say yes? Well, if you don't have the data, you can't say it, right?
Right.
And so I think it's, for me, really the importance of carving out time, daily is ideal, but at least weekly, to go back and kind of review everything or every interaction that you can, at least get it kind of documented simply. That's the things that I'm constantly trying to do. But, also too, I've learned that founder-led sales are different than enterprise sales, right? And what I mean by that is as we grow, when we reach a certain threshold, I will bring in a head of sales or business development who will back up the role, right? I will still do sales and train them, but early stage as a founder, it does look different how and what we sell versus once we actually now have 3 carrier partnerships and we have this many users, the sales look different. And so the focus looks different too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So early stage is really leaning into the, Dan, I know you really like me. I know you want to work with me. Like, I need you to say yes so we can start testing these things. So it just, I probably went off a tangent there, but I think at least for me, those are the things that I think about.
Yeah, no, it's a good tangent. I mean, I think a lot of earlier stage companies that I work with, when I start to look under the hood of kind of like exploring what they're doing today, right? And I'll try to figure out what kind of stuff they're tracking, and even sometimes if they're like, hey, we don't track anything, it's like, okay, well, let's just try to, like, baby steps, right? Like, establish kind of a baseline, and what's roughly the cost of acquiring a customer, and we like kind of reverse engineer what that possibly is. And it's like a very unnerving, kind of scary thing for them to be like trying to apply, make some assumptions and take, sort of some educated guesses about what certain metrics are. But it's just like those small steps to get to kind of what you said, just figuring out the process and the system that will help you do it over the course of time, just to make it easier. You got to start somewhere, and that's actually probably a good segue to my next question, which is talk about AI a little bit. I think that was more through like the product lens of like maybe having kind of AI in some way part of the product. So it's kind of a two-part question: is what are you kind of excited about in terms of AI for the product, but then also just for kind of running the business? It could be marketing, or it could be, anything on the business side.
Yeah, I think that the opportunity with AI, and at least for me, as I'm getting more comfortable with, kind of what they're calling agents, right? Where I can basically have team members that are AI agents who do certain roles. I think that it really allows us to do more with less if it's done right. Augmenting myself, I think that that's really exciting. But I also too, I think that right now, and this is my personal feeling, I feel like right now there's a lot of effort, energy, and probably even money that's just being wasted using some of these AI tools. Like, for example, I probably get now at least 10, if not 20 sales marketing emails every single day because they can do it by volume so much easier. 99% of it's crap. Like, it's not at all someone I would work with. They're telling me about like, oh, we've worked with a company just like yours achieve, $40 billion in revenue. And I'm like, then it's not just like me. Like, yeah, do I want $40 billion? Sure. Okay. But it's just such trash. I'm sorry for lack of a better word. And so I think that right now it's really I feel like, for me at least, it's putting a negative taste in people's mouth because they're actually not personalizing the way they're saying they are. It's that kind of, what is it? The spray and pray, right? Smile and dial kind of thing.
Yep.
It's just, we don't have the time to review all this. And if you spent more time and more effort to actually give me a better insight, or even to focus better on who is a good customer for you, you're going to have a better throughput. So I think right now, the negative is it's just a lot of noise and it's kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at my inbox right now, and I would say 2/3 of it from the weekend is trash.
Yep.
It just is. So when we're looking at how do we leverage AI, I am very mindful of how we use it. I don't want to be that where it's like we're just bombarding our potential partners or customers with trash. I just don't want that. I would rather it be, drafted by me or a team member and it only goes out once a month. Because at least then I know it's something that we've put our eyes on and we know it's valuable versus something that's just being thrown out in the world. So I probably went a slightly different direction than you're hoping for that, but it's people who are using it, just spend a little bit more time and effort. Like, if you don't know, don't use it, because you're just burning people and they're not going to want to work with you in the end.
Yeah. It's like, I think in those examples, AI is like the hyperdrive. But if you're already kind of going the wrong direction and kind of doing lazy sales and marketing, well, now you got hyperdrive. You're like going a billion miles an hour in the wrong direction. But if you are using it in the right way, it is valuable. And I think I might have you beat. I got an email that said from one mompreneur to another, or it was something about being an inspiring woman in tech. And I had to respond to that one, and I said, I think your AI targeting might be a little bit off.
I would say so. And it's not like Dan is a name that is generally like, misinterpreted. It's not like Alex, right? Where Alex could go either way.
Right. Yeah. I had flashbacks to when I was a little kid and the teacher called me Danielle and
yeah. Okay. There you go.
But it's, and I think for AI, not to go again on too much of a tangent, but it's like, at least in marketing, I think there's AI that can kind of do some of the execution for you of like, if it's an email or if it's like whatever. And then the AI can do some of maybe the distribution, but there are levels deeper within the business that I think a lot of people are just figuring out how to use AI to help with some of the strategy, to help with some of the systems of just like taking the stuff you're already doing, it's not really AI doing it, and it's just making you more efficient or helping you kind of see
Yeah.
things different through different lens. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm just now like spending a bit more time on, for myself and also with
Yeah.
clients. Um, but yeah, kind of talking to a bunch of founders, like it's almost the question you have to ask because it is so top of mind for everybody, and and everyone's learning so quickly how to use it, and like you said, also how to not use it. Um,
Yeah.
so last question I have for you, and I think this probably is a little bit of a softball question, and we've talked about it probably already. Um, but for other founders in FamTech, InsurTech, or just in general, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned? Sort of advice that you'd give? I know that's pretty broad, and we've talked about some of it already. But what kind of advice would you give to somebody kind of maybe just starting out or just figuring it out?
Gosh, so many things. I think one is that really understand who's already in your network that could be a supporter or a potential user or someone who could actually just give you feedback on whatever it is you're trying to build, right? I think that that can be a great place to start. And on the flip side of that is there's a book called The Mom Test, which is your mom's always going to tell you that it's a beautiful baby and that she loves it, and you're gonna save the world and you're gonna be a multi-billionaire, right? So I think you got to you got to kind of balance those two things, right? Is this customer feedback or is this someone who's just there to pet your ego?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you got to think through that a little bit. I think the other thing too is, and this is for me what works well. I don't know if this works well for everybody, but I I try and give back time. I try and support other founders. I try and, give pitch feedback or, you know, give them feedback on their product if I'm could be a potential user for them. And sometimes I get feedback from folks like, "Oh, like, you know, why do you spend your time doing that?" And I think for me it's a bit of like volunteerism. I think it's just part of my nature and my culture that I try and do that, right? Whereas, I've had a couple of folks and be like, "Well, like I saw you at that event and that was a 6 hours. Like couldn't you use those 6 hours by doing more product development?" And I was like, "Of course, absolutely." But I was like, what you didn't see was I met 3 people who actually talked about stories that specifically were aligned to what we were building, another person who made an introduction to their mom who is currently living this right now and is going to be a guest on our podcast, right? So like by me giving back, one, it makes me feel better, but I think makes me think different about what we're doing, but also two, like it leads into a lot of other opportunity. And so for me, I think just don't always be looking for people to give to you. All of us have value and we can share our insights and expertise with people around us. So I don't know. I believe in give get,
Mm-hmm.
right? Try and give a little bit and get some at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. Um, and then just reach out anytime. Like this is a very, people ask me like now that I've been doing this full time for 2 years, ideating for a total of 3 before, with the 31 year of kind of ideation and early stages, reflecting on it. And I was like, look, this is by far the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life, but it's also the most fun that I've ever had. Right. And so that's the balance, right? It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's also the most fun. And I think that most founders have a similar experience. But what I would say is that, you know, in the highs of highs, it's fantastic. And the lows of lows, I've never experienced anything lower than being a founder. And so in those moments, like just have a really good support system around you, have at least 1 or 2 other entrepreneurs, founders who you can reach out to where it's like, man, I don't know how I'm going to get through the next day. Like, can we just have a quick conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Because it can feel very, very lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so,
Yeah.
but you're not alone.
Yeah. No, I mean it's good advice. I talk about this all the time when I was in the more corporate marketing world, working for agencies. After a while, I was just sort of there weren't really any high highs, there weren't really low lows. I was just kind of
Yeah.
numb,
Mhm.
and I wasn't fulfilled. And then I kind of went off on my own and kind of did a bunch of different things on my own, and then the same thing, a lot of high highs, a lot of low lows, but it was very fulfilling and wouldn't trade that for anything else, and it's always different. So yeah, it's great
Yeah.
advice for people to be not only ready for that but also like you said, finding some of those ways to kind of, help on that journey too, right?
Yeah.
So, Paul, I really appreciate it. I think we're right about at time. Before I let you go, because I think this episode won't come out till probably after your podcast releases, or at the very least, it'll be around the same time. If you want to tell people kind of where to find the podcast, what the name of it's going to be, and then anything else you want to give people for Tumbleweed of how to find you or get in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan. Dan, it's been a real pleasure. And yes, to your point, so Tumbleweed is powering a new podcast, which launches on September 5th. It is called Sandwiched, Sandwiched. It's going to be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. So we are going to have video content to go with it as well, because some of our users said they like to actually watch podcasts. So super exciting about that. And it's all about sandwich stories, right? You talked earlier about kind of the sandwich generation. The kind of standard that we hear people talking about it is they've got kids and aging parents, but our sandwich lives are very nuanced, and some of them include pets, some of them include businesses, some of them are startup founders, some includes partners or spouses, aunts, uncles, even neighbors. And so we're trying to bring kind of the whole array of sandwich stories into the ecosystem. So I'd love to join you. Anybody who's interested in learning about more at Tumbleweed, hello@tumbleweedplan.com, tumbleweedplan.com. Thank you so much. I'm Paul Richardson. It's been a pleasure.
All right, Paul, thanks again for the time. I know taking an hour and a half of what is probably a busy Monday for you is much appreciated, but I really enjoyed the chat, and I'll be sure to check out that podcast when it comes out.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thanks so much,
All
Dan.
right. Thanks, Paul. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.